Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so delighted to join you for part 3 of our story tonight. And what an interesting story it is too. Lancome and Juvenna have gone to live with their Aunt Jane in Canada, over the Rocky Mountains, an exquisite part of the world as we all know. But there are things that can happen in that part of the world, unusual, idiosyncratic things. And we're about to learn what could possibly have happened to Anna Torval, who was a woman who used to live in Aunt Jane's house, but died many, many years before. So is she going to find out what actually happened to that woman? Because we know that Juvenna is very curious about this indeed. So let's continue with our story. Aunt Jane was not remotely concerned about me or my brother Lancome going exploring in the woods, provided I had some bear spray with me and a whistle that I kept around my neck. If I wanted to go into the woods, all I needed to do was to inform her about it and tell her how long I would be gone for. But I was reticent to go exploring, even though I very much wanted to. It was rather like being pulled both ways. "I'm scared to go and play in the woods, Aunt Jane, after what happened to Anna Torval. What if me and Lancome were to go missing in there?" I wouldn't worry at all about what happened to poor Anna Torval all those years ago," said Aunt Jane, very kindly, giving me an encouraging smile. "That woman disappeared a long time ago. And I guess she was at the wrong place at the wrong time when tragedy invariably struck. It happens that way sometimes. And we don't know what really happened to her, do we? Her disappearance will always remain a mystery. Let's just say, Juvenna, Canada is a very large wilderness. People from all over the world come here every year to ambitiously explore the Rocky Mountains. And most of them, I'm very glad to say, return safe and well to their countries or the states in which they live in. And they are fine. No problems at all. Let me tell you something, Juvenna. I go through those woods all the time to take a shortcut to the neighbour's house to visit my good friend Marjorie, who lives there. Nothing untoward has ever happened to me, nor have I ever felt afraid in those woods. I did scare off a couple of nervous black bears once, of course, but they were more scared of me than I was of them, and they certainly didn't try to attack me. It's the grizzlies you need to worry about. If you take bear spray with you, I'm sure you will be absolutely fine. But I don't want you wandering off too far. You need to have your wits about you when you're rambling around the wilderness. But everybody knows that. You must remember that this vast Canadian wilderness, spread out before us, is home to a plethora of indigenous wildlife. But you don't need me to tell you that, for you've seen many animals since you've been here, haven't you, Juvenna?" "I sure have, Aunt Jane." "Well, there you go, then. You're a sensible girl, Juvenna, with a shrewd head on your wise little shoulders. You'll be perfectly safe in the wilderness. I can assure you of that. But I'm very glad you're being cautious, nevertheless. I mean, if Anna Torval had been cautious on the day she sauntered off into the woods and subsequently vanished, maybe her story would not have ended so tragically." "You really believe the woods are safe, do you, Aunt Jane?" I asked. "Look, Juvenna, is the New York subway safe? Or even crossing a road or taking a hike? Everything in life has risks, does it not? But if you apply common sense in crossing the road with care, you won't get run over, will you? Unless you're extremely unlucky, of course. It's the same with frolicking around in the woods. You need to be fully aware of your environment, and then you will be fine. If the woods become very quiet, that's a warning sign for you to leave at once. So follow your gut instincts, and they will guide you better than any compass can." I realized my Aunt Jane had made some invaluable points, and she was absolutely right on the money when she said hundreds of people came to the Canadian Rockies every single year, leaving in one piece, without being mauled by a grizzly bear, or disappearing off the face of the planet, never to be seen again. Yes, of course, there were disappearances all over the American continent every year, most especially in places like Alaska. But you couldn't live your life in fear, could you? or you'd end up not living it at all. Maybe I was my own worst enemy, building up Herculean obstacles in my own mind to prevent me from fully appreciating the adventurous opportunities the Canadian Rockies so happily provided all its intrepid adventure seekers. I would be an absolute fool to allow fear to rob me of enjoying Aunt Jane's place to the fullest, because I knew I was extremely lucky to be here. As Aunt Jane had promised, she brought my brother Luncombe a fabulous supply of paints, crayons and drawing paper, so he could thoroughly enjoy spending much of his time drawing or painting to his heart's content. It was easy to keep Luncombe entertained for hours on end, as unlike other children his own age, he never got bored when it came to drawing or painting. I would make sure that every single afternoon my little brother would take a long nap in his bedroom, and in that wonderful time that I had to myself, I would do my own thing, like reading a book or industriously rustling up something in Aunt Jane's kitchen, like baking a cake or some cookies that we'd have for tea later. By all accounts, my mother was doing remarkably well at home and making a speedy recovery from her stroke. So I knew I was going to make the most of spending this time with Aunt Jane and getting to know her even better. Aunt Jane was very good friends with the couple that lived on the neighbouring plot of land. One morning, a very battered-looking green Range Rover rattled precariously down our driveway, making quite a thunderous commotion on its approach. So the silence of the Rocky Mountains was rudely disturbed with the clattering sound of the rover. Finally it came to a standstill. I'm not sure if it was run on a diesel engine or not, but that car was a hell of a noisy. I was standing on the wraparound porch at the time, watching over my little brother, who was happily sitting at the Adirondack table, drawing a picture with some crayons. He was fully absorbed by the exercise, but even he curiously looked towards the driveway when he heard the clanging car making its approach. "Someone's come to visit Aunt Jane," he said. I affectionately rubbed my hand through Luncombe's wavy blonde curls and chuckled. "Yes, someone's come to visit Aunt Jane. It's a bit early in the morning for visitors, don't you think, Luncombe?" My brother stopped drawing and looked at the car more closely. "That is such a noisy car. Is there something wrong with the engine on it?" he asked me. "Why does it rattle so much?" "I'm not sure, Luncombe," I said. "I don't know anything about cars, but certainly if I were the driver, I would take it in for a check-up." "You mean to a car doctor?" asked Luncombe, chuckling at the very idea. "That's right, a car doctor. Maybe the car is suffering from stiff joints and has got a touch of arthritis. Maybe it's got a fever or a very bad cold, perhaps." At that my brother giggled. He rather liked the idea of a car struck down with arthritis, a high fever, or a very bad cold. Me and my brother Luncombe watched inquisitively from the porch, as the occupant in the car appeared to be taking an awfully long time in getting out of the vehicle, as if he or she was rather hesitant to do so. Finally the car door swung open. I observed a petite woman, probably over 4 foot tall, with a shock of wild white hair that looked as if it couldn't be tamed unless you held it down with a formidable hair gel. The woman casually climbed out of the car and began to look directly at the Torvalls. "That lady is very short," said Luncombe. "Her hair is as white as a fluffy cloud." I wasn't sure how old the woman was, but even from the distance her face was heavily lined so that her brown bird-like eyes were buried beneath the folds of her wrinkles. I suspected this woman spent an awful lot of her time out of doors. Her skin was probably weathered from extremes of temperature, from hot to cold. She could have been anywhere between 40 and 70, I decided. The woman was dressed very young and trendy, but then again it occurred to me that maybe she had to buy her clothes from the children's section at the boutique. She was wearing a pair of shocking bright pink leggings and a matching pale pink sweater. Although I wouldn't say she was unduly feminine, she probably pretty much liked the colour pink, like I did. We both unhesitantly abandoned the porch and hurried towards the mysterious stranger. We were never bashful towards strangers, my brother and I, and always liked to meet new people. The friendly woman greeted us both warmly, and didn't seem remotely surprised to see 2 youngsters at Aunt Jane's. She clearly knew why we were here, so I deduced Aunt Jane must have told her about us. Could this be her next-door neighbour Marjorie she'd talked about? who had a different opinion on what happened to Jane Torval. If that was indeed the case, I was looking forward to hearing her opinion on the matter. "Goodness gracious me! It is so delightful to meet the both of you," she said, looking at us appraisingly. "Now I need to get to the trunk. I've got some nice little surprises for you back there." We watched the woman walking over to the trunk of her car and removing a basket of yummy-looking goodies that had been so perfectly packed together. They looked like they'd come from a refined, very upmarket delicatessens that was clearly focused on doing home deliveries. I was to discover she'd baked all this stuff herself. "Your Aunt Jane told me about her favourite niece and nephew, so I thought I must pop around to say hello to you both. I do hope you both like fudge." "We are Aunt Jane's only niece and nephew," I said. "She only has one sister." "But you brought fudge?" I asked, looking at this lady as if she was the fairy godmother from Cinderella, because fudge was my absolute favourite sweet in the entire world, and Lankum similarly loved fudge, almost as much as I did. I had tried to make fudge over the years at home, when I'd become overcome with a sweet tooth, and in our house there was always sugar, condensed milk and butter available in our pantry, so fudge was a go-to sweet treat I would always consider making. Sometimes my feeble, rather beleaguered, half-hearted attempts to make fudge had turned it into toffee. "You make fudge!" said Lankum, looking at the lady in absolute delight. "I love fudge! So does Juvenna! It's the best sweet in the whole wide world! Juvenna sometimes makes fudge, but it doesn't always work out properly." The woman smiled. "Fudge can be tricky to make, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty plain sailing, you know. I bought you both fudge. I made vanilla and chocolate. Then I made some blueberry and apple pie, some chocolate chip cookies, and some of my fresh apple fritters to welcome you both to Canada. I've also made mac and cheese and some miniature chicken pies on the savoury side of things, as they are all specialities of mine. I've bought you some maple syrup as well, the finest you can get from these parts, to have with your pancakes in the morning. Very delicious served with crispy bacon, you know. And this is the finest maple syrup you can get in these parts. Your aunt tells me this is your first visit to Canada, so I wanted to make you both feel very warmly welcome." "You bought all this stuff especially for us?" I said, looking at the kind lady in amazement. "That's so very kind of you. I don't know what to say." "It's an absolute pleasure, love," said the woman, smiling warmly at me. "I live next door to your property. I usually take a shortcut through the woods to come and see your Aunt Jane. I decided to bring the car over today, as I need to go to town later." The woman pointed towards the woods. "My house fringes the edge of the woods over there. It's the dividing line between your aunt's property and mine. There's a trail in the woods with an arrow pointing to the willows. If you follow that path, it leads directly to my house. But you do need to stick to the trail, and then it's very easy to find my property, which is called the Willows, probably because it overlooks a creek with lots of old willow trees that bend over the water like decrepit old men looking for a penny that they've invariably dropped." At this expression I laughed, as I imagined all the slumped old willow trees bending down over the water, desperately hoping to find a lost coin, and the imagery made me smile. I decided at once I very much liked this eccentric woman. "Willow trees are my absolute favourite," I said. "I know what you mean about that. I like them too. Believe me, there is so much bird life going on in those willow trees. It's an ecosystem all of its own. Last year in autumn, would you believe some birds were still making their nests in those branches? But then the weather has been uncharacteristically warm of late. You should come and visit me for tea sometime. Just follow the trail and you will find my house soon enough. I do enjoy receiving visitors, and you are both welcome to come and see me. My husband Malcolm would love to meet the both of you. Maybe he'll even take you out on a hike or a spot of fishing sometime. My name is Marjorie Brenner, by the way. And you are?" "My name is Juvenna. My brother's name is Lankum." The woman looked delighted to hear our names. "Dearie me! What lovely, lovely names! So incredibly unique, if you don't mind my saying so. Believe it or not, I used to use Juvena skincare products on my face. Very good they were, too. My skin looked remarkably good when I was using it. I was very keen on the Lancome mascara as well. Lancome makes the very best mascara in the world. You do both realize you're the owners of names of exclusive cosmetic houses. I wouldn't mind being named after a cosmetic house myself. I quite fancy a name like Maybelline, Guerlain, Gatineau, or even Dior. Pretty special if you ask me. Do you know why your mother called you such fabulously original names?" "Well, my mother told me she didn't know what on earth to call me when she learnt I was going to be a girl," I told Marjorie. "She was thinking of calling me Sapphire, but then as she was putting on her moisturiser one night before returning to bed, she glanced down at the pot of cream she was applying to her skin and saw the name Juvena on the label and thought the name was perfect for a girl, so she called me that. I think she called my brother Lancome because she had called me after a skincare house, so why not my brother as well? I expect she thought Lancome sounded more masculine. I guess that was her thinking at the time." "Why not, indeed? What a lovely story." Marjorie handed me the basket of goodies. "You can take that into the house, will you, Juvena? I've got a slight ache to this right arm of mine." "Glad to do so," I said, taking the basket from her. Seconds later, Aunt Jane emerged from the house. She sashayed towards us with a warm smile on her face. "Marjorie, my dear, how good it is to see you. I was wondering when you were going to grace us with your presence. The children are looking forward to meeting you, and now they have. So you've just met my niece and nephew, I see," she said, her eyes dancing as she threw her arms affectionately around Marjorie to embrace her with a warm hug. "This, Marjorie, is my beloved niece Juvena," said Aunt Jane, pointing towards me. "I know, she just introduced herself to me," said Marjorie, giving me a wink, "and I very much like the name Juvena. I was just telling your niece here that she's named after a very distinguished cosmetic house." "I didn't know that. I had no idea that Juvena was the name of a cosmetic house. My sister never told me that. It just goes to show you learn something new every day. Now, children, I want to introduce you to my lovely next-door neighbour, Marjorie. Remember I was telling you all about her, Juvena? Did I not tell you she'd pop around? She lives through those woods over there, at a house called the Willows. You definitely must go and see her sometime. I know she's come over here today to bring you some of her world-famous homemade fudge." "I love fudge, Aunt Jane. It's my favourite sweet of all time." "Well, then you're in for quite the treat. Honestly, Marjorie, you are the end," said Aunt Jane with a twinkle in her eyes. "Let me tell you, children, Marjorie here is an incredible cook. And if you love fudge as much as you say you do, Juvena, let me tell you, you're going to be very happy. Let's just say I've never eaten more delicious fudge than the fudge that Marjorie makes. It quite literally melts in the mouth. It was my mother's favourite recipe," said Marjorie. "She got the recipe from Anna Torval, who was married to James Torval, the original owner of your house. If you remember, Jane, Aunt Torval went missing in those woods over there," said Marjorie, pointing to the large gathering of trees in the distance. "Goodness gracious," said Aunt Jane. "You mean to tell me the fudge you make is actually Anna Torval's recipe? I had absolutely no idea. Me and Juvena were only talking about her disappearance the other day, weren't we, Juvena?" "That's right," I said. "It's her recipe," said Marjorie proudly. "I've still got the paper it's written on, in her beautiful curly writing." "Aunt Jane says you've got a different theory about what happened to Anna Torval. I'd love to hear it if you don't mind." "Juvena here," said my aunt proudly, "would like to become an investigative journalist one day, and wants to get a Bachelor of Journalism when she goes to college. So you must forgive her if she assaults you with all these questions, Marjorie. Since she's been here, she's talked about little else beyond what happened to Anna Torval. She's even had dreams about the woman at night, haven't you, Juvenna? I have, I said, and I don't even normally remember my dreams, so it's very weird. How extraordinary that you should be dreaming of the woman, said Marjorie, looking extremely intrigued. I admit it's a tragic story, but I did know her. The Willows was my parents' house, you see. My mother was very good friends with Anna Torval. She was pretty much a fixture and fitting in our lives, you know. She was very close to my mother, you see. A lovely lady she was, too. She had beautiful auburn hair, porcelain skin, and blue eyes. A very striking woman she was. An excellent cook and artist as well. Let's just say her oils on canvas were absolutely superb. And I'm sure, Juvenna, that your aunt has shown you some of her oil paintings of the trees and the mountains she painted in the hallway. That will give you an idea of what an extraordinary artist she actually was. Yes, I've seen them. I particularly love the one of the blossoming magnolia tree, set against the mountains and the pink sky. That's my favourite picture too, said Marjorie approvingly. I love the way Anna picked up the blossoms so perfectly. And I have a big fixation on the colour pink, you see, she said, pointing to her clothes. I wanted to ask Marjorie more about Anna Torval, but my aunt beckoned everybody into the house, and I lost my train of thought, especially with the distraction of the warm smell of Marjorie's blueberry and apple pie that kept teasing my nose and causing my stomach to rumble very hungrily. Goodness gracious me, where are my manners? Said Aunt Jane apologetically. Don't just stand there, Marjorie. I hope you're going to grace us with your presence and join us for a cup of tea, especially since you've brought us such a feast. I tell you what I will do. I will put some warm blueberry and apple pie onto 4 plates, and I'll serve it up with plenty of cream. The kids need to try this pie of yours. It's absolutely heavenly. How can I refuse? Said Marjorie, looking extremely grateful. I'm quite parched myself, so a cup of tea will go down very nicely. She bent down to give Lankum a hug. I've heard all about you, Lankum. I understand you very much love art. Your Aunt Jane tells me you're quite the artist. I'm going to be like Picasso one day. I like to draw and paint and play with papier-mâché, said Lankum proudly. I've been drawing pictures on the table on the porch. Would you like to see them? I can show you if you like. Well, I'd love to see them very much, said Marjorie, taking my brother's hand in hers. She was clearly good with children. Why don't you show me what you've drawn, Lankum? Lankum looked terribly pleased. He had a contented expression on his little face. He led Marjorie to the porch very eagerly. I hate to say this, but I hadn't been observing any of the pictures my brother had drawn. I hate to admit, every time he drew a picture, I would only briefly glance at it and say, That's nice, Lankum, like you do with about as much boredom as you experience when you watch paint dry. Lankum would wear an irritated frown on his face. But you don't even look at my picture. How do you know it's nice if you don't even look at it, Juvenna? Because I would say, in my quick defence, everything you draw is nice, Lankum. I don't have to look at your picture to know it's absolutely great. Lankum would roll his eyes at the back of his head and say, Whatever. So with Marjorie expressing a keen interest to see his work, I dare say he thought all his Christmases had come at once. I tell you what I will do, said Aunt Jane. Marjorie, you stay here with the children. Sit at the table and make yourself comfortable on the porch. I will go and get the tea ready, and we'll bring it outside for us all to enjoy. The weather is so beautiful today. We might as well make the most of it and enjoy it. You stay with the kids. I can see they're eager to get to know you, Marjorie. Marjorie was bending over to examine my brother's artwork, and judging by the enchanted expression on her face, she was very impressed with the quality of my brother's work. You drew this yourself, Lankum. You're a very clever boy. I can see that. Lankum nodded proudly. Do you like my picture, Marjorie? He asked, looking chuffed. Well, I really do, said Marjorie. I can't believe you're only 5 years old, and you draw like this, Lankum. You're very, very good. I couldn't draw like this when I was your age, you know. But mind you, I can't even draw now. Everything I draw is like a squiggle on a page." At this, Lankum giggled, and then he said earnestly, "I want to be an artist one day. My teacher at nursery says my pictures are much better than the other boys and girls my age. She says that I've got a very special gift." "Your teacher's absolutely right, Lankum. I couldn't have put it better myself. You are very gifted indeed. With work like this, I think you're going to be a fine artist one day. Just like Anna Torval was." She pointed at the characters on the picture to affirm their identities with Lankum. "I see you've drawn your aunt's house, the Torvals, over there. Those are the mountains in the background, and all the trees of the wood grove. You've got 3 cats there in the grass, haven't you? So your Aunt Jane's cats have been included in your picture, I see. And also some of her chickens. Then there are 4 people in the picture. Let's see. One looks rather like Juvena. The other is your Aunt Jane. And who's that person over there?" "That's me," said Lankum proudly. "Can you not see? I'm the smallest in the picture." "But who's the lady in the picture with the red hair?" asked Marjorie. "That's my friend Anna." "Your friend Anna?" said Marjorie. "How interesting." "But you don't have a friend called Anna," I said, looking at my brother incredulously, with a perplexed expression on my face. I was used to my brother drawing the things that he saw around him, and not just pictures of strangers. I began to wonder if our move to Canada had made my brother Lankum make up a fictitious friend. I'd recently seen him talking to someone that wasn't actually there, and I'd heard him chatting away garrulously and giggling in his bedroom when he was supposed to be enjoying his afternoon nap. I had thought nothing of it at the time. He was 5 years old, and kids of that same age did like playing make-believe. But I have to admit Lankum had not exhibited such idiosyncratic behaviour before, until we'd moved into the Torvals with Aunt Jane. Aunt Jane had even said to me recently, "I didn't know little Lankum had an invisible friend. I saw him on the swing set the other day, talking to someone, and no one was there." I hadn't given Lankum's absurd behaviour of late much heed, for 5-year-old children tend to have wild imaginations and seem to thoroughly enjoy living in a fanciful world of their own creation. I know I did much the same when I was 5. I would pretend to be Alice in Wonderland. I owned a pair of sparkling red slippers and would pretend to be dancing down a yellow-bricked road. I will admit I did feel slightly affronted. I thought I'd been enough entertainment for my brother, but obviously not. Maybe not being at nursery anymore, with boys and girls of a similar age to him, he now felt the need to recreate more friends, to compensate for being around adults all the time. You heard about this happening an awful lot, in children who didn't have brothers and sisters to play with. To all intents and purposes, in Lankum's case, there was a sizable age difference between the 2 of us, so I suspect I was more like a maternal figure in his life, rather than just a sibling. "Anna's my friend," he said proudly. "She used to live in this house. She's very nice. She comes to visit me when I take my afternoon nap." I turned to Marjorie to explain what I thought was going on. "I think Lankum over here overheard me talking to Aunt Jane about Anna Torval, and has decided to include her in his pictures. I've been talking about the subject an awful lot, you see. I'm intrigued about why she disappeared all those years ago like she did. I love mysteries of any kind. That's why I want to become a journalist." "Anna Torval did live here," my brother repeated insistently, screwing up his eyes at me. "Exactly right," I said. "She did live here. But I've been talking about her a lot, haven't I, Lankum? No wonder you've decided to include her in your pictures," I said kindly. Marjorie intervened, giving my brother a warm, encouraging smile. "I'm very sure that Anna Torval would be absolutely delighted that you thought of her and included her in your pictures, Lankum. I know she loved children. She was unable to have any of her own, you know. She would have loved you so much, Lankum, sharing a common interest with her such as art. Anna loved to paint and draw like you do. You're right, Lankum, she did live in this house. She was married to a very handsome man, you know, called James Torval. He was the one that built this beautiful house of Aunt Jane's, with his own loving hands. Have you noticed the attention to detail around this place? She asked, turning to me. I nodded. Yes, I have seen the details. They're amazing. Aunt Jane says a person only spends money on a place if they intend to stay there for good. But James Torval didn't know that his life would be cut short living here, when his wife just disappeared like that. It's such a sad story. Your aunt is absolutely right about that. The Torvals certainly put their mark on this place. I know when your Aunt Jane moved in here, she very nearly sold the Torvals, because she could feel the heaviness of the place. She thought this house, well, in this house, I mean, that she was picking up the energy of James Torval, hopelessly depressed energy, if you know what I mean, after his wife's disappearance. I was the one that told your aunt to get the house blessed. When Father Reese blessed this house, he picked up on the energy of Anna Torval, would you believe? And once he blessed the place, the energy lifted almost at once. I was terribly pleased when that happened, because your Aunt Jane chose to stay here for good, and never ever looked back. And since then, she and I have become the greatest of friends. I couldn't imagine her not being my next-door neighbour anymore. So did you know the Torvals? I asked. Did you get to meet Anna Torval yourself before she vanished? Marjorie chuckled. Your aunt's right about you. You're going to be quite some journalist one day, Juvena. You do ask an awful lot of questions, and you need an inquiring mind to become an accomplished journalist for sure. I guess I do ask lots of questions, but I'm really fascinated by this case. I really want to know what happened to Anna Torval. If you must know, Juvena, I did know Anna Torval, but as I was saying to you earlier, she was closer friends with my mother. They both shared a passion for art, cooking, and photography. Anna was a frequent visitor to our house. My mother and her were always exchanging recipes together. So the fudge recipe is hers, and then it soon became my mother's, and it became her go-to favourite recipe for fudge, and now it's mine. So what do you think happened with Anna Torval? Do you think she was killed by a grizzly like the police believed? Absolutely not, said Marjorie. I think James Torval had something to do with his wife's death. I never told anyone about my feelings on this matter at the time, least of all the police. But you know Aunt Jane. Well, she knows my story. You think James Torval was behind his wife's death? But how can that be? He idolised her, didn't he? So why would he want to harm her, if he loved her so much? It's true, Juvena. James did idolise Anna very much. That might have been part of the problem. He put her on a pedestal, you see. You should never do that with another human being, because we're all desperately flawed, are we not? No one is ever perfect. I know the couple had a very happy marriage together, but Anna was nursing a rather dark secret, I'm afraid. It was a secret that she'd shared with my mother, which I believe contributed greatly to her disappearance. A secret, I said. I certainly liked the sound of this. This was why I asked so many questions. Life was so much more exhilarating when you made inquiries. You could connect the dots together soon and make sense of things. As far as I was concerned, the story connected to the enigmatic vanishing of Anna Torval was getting very intriguing indeed, and for some reason I couldn't get enough about learning about the subject. My interest had clearly rubbed off on Lankum as well, for he was now drawing pictures of the dead woman. Marjorie's face went as pink as a peony. She looked a tad embarrassed to tell us about this secret, but she did so regardless. I realised her embarrassment was due to eavesdropping in on a conversation that was no business of hers at the time, but I couldn't blame her for doing that. Much like Marjorie, if I'd overheard a conversation like that, I would have found it very difficult to turn away. As I was saying, without wishing to sound like a broken record, it was common for Anna Torval to visit my mother at the house. They were extremely close, the two of them. They both shared a passion for cooking, so they had a great deal in common. Sometimes they would cook together in my mother's kitchen to make stuff for fetes. Things like that. I was so used to seeing Anna around and about. So she was very common in our lives. One morning, it was probably about 11 o'clock. My mother and Anna were cooking together. I think they were making cheese soufflés in the kitchen. They were determined to get them absolutely right, because making cheese soufflés can be a tricky business, you know. They had promised me that I could have some cheese soufflé when it was fully baked, and I adored cheese of any kind. I could smell the delicious aroma of melted cheese. That got my stomach rumbling and drew me straight to the kitchen. It was on my approach to the kitchen that I overheard the two women talking together. I guess I shouldn't have eavesdropped in the way I did, but Anna sounded so desperately upset. I guess my curiosity was piqued, so instead of walking away, as I should have done, I stood at the door and listened in. Now, I'm not proud of myself for that. "What was Anna saying to your mother?" I asked. "What's troubling you, Anna?" my mother was asking her. "Something's very heavy on your mind. Is that why you wanted to make something airy and light like soufflé today? To lighten your mood, so to speak? If you don't mind my saying so, Anna, you don't look quite like yourself today. I've known you for many years, and something was off about you the moment you walked through that kitchen door, with such a hang-dog expression on your face." "Is it that obvious?" "Of course it's obvious, Anna. Blindingly so. You're one of my most precious friends, and there's nothing you cannot tell me. I hope you know that. You never know, you might feel relieved to get whatever is ailing you off your chest. And believe it or not, I'm an excellent listener, even if I say so myself." "I'm being blackmailed, Dorothy. That's what's going on, which is why I'm in such a dreadful state. I don't know who's doing this to me, but I can't get a wink of sleep at night. I'm terribly afraid of things going completely pear-shaped in my life. I wake up every morning in quite the sweat. Even James has been asking me what's going on with me. But if I tell him my secret, I'm so worried about how he might react. James thinks I'm perfect. I so wish I was. If he knew what I'd done, I'm not sure he'd be able to forgive me." "You're being blackmailed?" came my mother's appalled voice. "You're kidding me. Who would do such a dreadfully unkind thing to you?" "I have no idea, Dorothy. I wish I could answer that question myself. Someone is sending me threatening notes in the post. The postal stamps are all local, so it's got to be someone that's living in this area that knows me well. And worst of all, they know my secret. They're posting me threats. Can you believe that?" "No, I can't. It sounds like something out of an Alfred Hitchcock movie. How absolutely dreadful! You poor, poor thing. I can't imagine what you're going through. You have no idea, Dorothy. You have no idea what it's like to be me at the moment. I'm literally walking on eggshells, always looking over my shoulders in case someone is watching me. The first note that came to me, in the post box, was done on white paper with the letters cut out from a magazine. It said, "I know what you did, and if you don't pay up, I will tell your husband James your dirty little secret, and he will know what a slut you really are." "Oh, he said that? My God, the man called you a slut? You've got to be kidding me. That's pretty heavy." "I'm not kidding, Dorothy. Do I look like I'm kidding?" "No, you don't. Your face has gone as white as a sheet. I've never seen you look more flustered. I was so scared, Dorothy. Let me tell you, you have no idea. Look at me. I'm shaking like a leaf, just thinking about it." So there we are. That is the end of part 3 of our story. Part 4 is tomorrow night. I look forward to you joining me then. Isn't it getting very exciting? I'll see you then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.